And welcome back to Hilltop Stovetop, the show where we teach you how to make great meals in an ordinary kitchen. Today is a very special episode because it's going to be the last episode that we film in this particular kitchen. I am in the process of moving, and so what that means is there'll be a little gap in filming while I get settled in my new location. And in the meantime, I hope that you'll continue to like and subscribe and put into the comments section on YouTube the kind of things that you'd like to learn how to cook in when I start refilming again, because I'm always looking for ideas for whatever are your favorite things. Today's episode, we're going to be making a buttercream cake, and it's with a maple sauce, and I thought I would do that since this is the last one I'll be filming in the Ottawa Valley, which is home to Mapleside Sugar Bush, which is where I get this wonderful maple syrup, and I wanted to leave you something to remember the Ottawa Valley with. This recipe is actually for a Bundt cake, but I've already packed my Bundt cake pan, so I'm going to be making it into little cupcakes, but it's still going to taste just as good, and it'll be easy to serve and make the house smell fantastic. So let's get started. So, as the name would suggest, when you're making a buttercream cake, you're going to start off with lots of butter. So we have 1 cup of butter here, and we're going to add to that 2 cups of sugar, and we're going to cream those things together. So you remember when we did the episode on our cookies, where we were creaming the butter and the sugar together, and that incorporates it and fluffs up the butter a little bit. And of course, if you've got a mixer, it's a pretty easy thing to do, but if you don't have a mixer, what you have to do is take a spoon and rub it all together. But this will be quick, even if it's a little bit noisy. And of course, we want to make sure that we keep scraping down the sides so that we don't miss any bits. Well incorporated, and then the next thing we're going to do is add 4 eggs. So this is quite a rich cake, having 4 eggs in it. There are recipes out there that have just 1 or 2 eggs, but this is just a delicious, rich cake. It's wonderful. Oh, and there's our oven already preheated to 350 degrees, so it's ready. Now we're going to mix this up again, and what will happen is this will not just mix the butter and the eggs and the sugar together, but it will actually get quite fluffy. So we're going to let it mix for a while until it fluffs up. Okay, so that looks nice and fluffy. And now we get the 2 things ready. One is your dry ingredients, and the other is your liquid. So in this case, we've got 3 cups of all-purpose flour, and we're going to add into that a teaspoon of baking powder, and let me see here, how much baking soda, and a half a teaspoon of baking soda. And one of the reasons that we're using baking soda, and you'll remember this from when we did the biscuit episode, is this particular cake is made with buttermilk. And when you're using buttermilk to counteract the acidity in that, we always add a little bit of baking soda in addition to the baking powder. So now we're just going to sift these things together so that the soda and the baking powder and the flour are all well incorporated, so we don't end up with a clump of soda or a clump of baking powder in one part of the cake and not in the rest. Okay, there we go. And then for the buttermilk, It calls for a cup of buttermilk. There we go. And the other thing, this recipe calls for vanilla, but instead of vanilla, I'm going to incorporate some maple syrup straight into the batter, in addition to the maple syrup that's going to be in the sauce that goes on this. So, num num. Now, at this part, what we're going to do is we're going to alternate a little bit of the dry ingredients and a little bit of wet ingredients. Once you're making a cake with baking powder, you don't want to over mix it. That gives you a bit of a dome to the top, which you don't want. But you still need to, if you put in all the dry stuff to this first, then it'll be too stiff. So we alternate. So we're going to put in about a third of that and mix that. And then add in about half of the buttermilk. And scrape our sides. And the second third. And the rest of the buttermilk. And then the last of the dry ingredients. Oops. And scrape down the sides again. One last scrape, so you can see how there's always a little bit of flour that fluffs up on the sides, and that's why we need to make sure we're scraping things down, because that little bit of flour can make a big difference to our consistency. Perfect. See, cakes are really pretty easy, and you know, it's the same technique that you would use if you were to buy a cake mix, except when you're making it from scratch, you not only have the real butter in it, but you can vary your flavors much simpler, much easier. Okay, so there we go. Lovely smooth batter. And now we're just going to take our muffin tins. So these muffin tins are silicone, so they are flexible. And I've recently started cooking with silicone products. I find them really perfect. We get a nice consistent finish, and things don't stick too badly, which is nice. So we're going to fill these about 2/3 full. Okay, and as we get down to the bottom of the batter here, it's worked out pretty close for 24 cupcakes, but I'm just going to have a quick look and see which ones I was a bit stingy on. So now we have our 24 muffins all ready to go. The oven is preheated to 325 degrees. I'm going to pop them in for about 20 minutes, and you'll see these beautiful things when they come out. Okay, so we're just at the 20-minute mark, And this original recipe was, as I mentioned, meant to be in a Bundt pan. And if you do it in a Bundt pan, it takes about 55 to 60 minutes to cook. So I was kind of estimating at the 20 minutes. So if we have a little look in here, you can see that the cakes have risen up, but they're not brown yet. So we're going to leave them for another 5 minutes, so that making it a total of 25 minutes, and then see how that does. Because we're adapting this recipe, we kind of had to hit and miss, and as I've mentioned before, better to have it too short a time and have to add some time to it versus guessing that it was going to be 25 minutes and burning something. So let's wait another 5 minutes and see where we stand. Okay, so here we are at 25 minutes. They are a little bit browner, but you can see they're browned around the outside, but they're close. I'm going to give it another, I think another 5 minutes isn't going to hurt these things. So that would give us a total of 30 minutes cooking time. And that's a testimony to the richness of this cake too, that it's a fairly heavy cake and it does take a little bit longer to cook. So total of 30 minutes, that should do it for us. Okay, so here we are at 30 minutes of cooking time. Ah, beautiful. Okay, so there we have 24 lovely little cupcakes. And with cupcakes, it's, or any kind of cake type thing, you let them cool in the pan a bit before you take them out. So while they're cooling, we're going to start on the sauce. Okay, so this sauce is what really makes these outstanding from a cake perspective. So we're going to start off with 1/4 cup of butter. And pop it in our... And we got a brand new block of butter here that doesn't want to come out. There we go. All right, so 1/4 cup. So again, we got half of that is 1 cup, half a cup, and that would make it 1/4 cup right here at the end. Pop that in the pan to start melting. And then we're going to add to that 1/4 cup of brown sugar. So we're going to end up with a kind of a caramely, creamy sauce here. So there's 1/4 cup of brown sugar. And I'm going to do 1/4 cup of maple syrup. And sometimes when I'm making this, I'll actually make a double batch because it is so good. You want to have some warm to pour over the cake. And then 1/2 cup of cream. Yep. And you can actually use whipping cream for this, so it should make it even more amazing. And a few tablespoons of Canadian whiskey. That is optional if you're not into liquor. You can also make it with, you could use any kind of, you could use bourbon or something if that's what you happen to have. And we're just going to stir this up. Let it all melt together. And the other thing that is an optional thing is to have some nuts handy to sprinkle over the top of this. When you're doing it as a Bundt cake, you sprinkle the nuts on the top and then pour the glaze over that. we're going to whisk this all together. The butter is melting, and we're going to let it get so it's bubbly. And then we're going to continue to let it bubble for just on a lower heat for about 5 minutes. Okay, so we've let this simmer for about 5 minutes now, so I'm going to turn it off, and I'm just going to pour it into here so that we've got an easier opportunity to pour. And you can see how it's quite bubbly still. Now, you can make this ahead of time and just warm it up for serving. It will separate if it cools for too long. But that's okay. You can stir it up and warm it up. And warmth is the key with this sauce. So now we're going to take our little cupcakes, pop them out. Oh, there's one for Coco. There's always one for Coco. So you can see how with this silicone base, how everything has come out so nice and brown now. And one for Coco. So now we're going to take a little plate here, and we'll pour a little bit of sauce onto the plate. Put a little muffin on there, and just a little drizzle over the top. And there we have it. Butter cake with maple sauce. So this is the one we dropped, and as I said, this is Coco's. Oh, delicious, eh, Coco? So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode where we made a buttercream cake with a maple sauce. And I look forward to seeing you in my new kitchen, where, in another month or so, we should be ready to go and cooking new delightful things in another part of Canada. So don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss things when I do come back on the air, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.